the greatest compliment is when someone takes your idea and runs with it and thinks of it as their own. I'll give you the credit. We can have the pat on the back and the circle time as a team. But what we want is for the business to pick up innovative ideas and make them part of our everyday operations.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lucas.
And I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And we're the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change. This is our podcast,
Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out,
where we highlight catalysts that are creating amazing change in the world. In this season of the podcast, we are diving deep into the skills that make catalysts successful. Today, I'm super thrilled to have the amazing and good friend, Melanie Hilton, the Senior Vice President of Innovation and Partnerships. She leads a team that investigates new technologies, partnerships, and business opportunities to increase the relevance and reach of GS1 standards. You should check out what that is if you don't know what GS1 is, because they're an amazing organization and going to drive even more change in the world. Melanie draws on her extensive background in retail technology. She oversees the exploration and collaboration opportunities to help businesses leveraging emerging technologies that include the Internet of Things, IoT, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and computer vision to address multiple business process challenges such as autonomous retail and the circular economy. Thanks for being with us today, Melanie.
Yes, thank you.
So we'd love to start off by hearing how you relate to the concept of catalyst.
Well, it's probably one of those happy accidents, I suppose, because I'm never quite satisfied with the status quo. And I think that was, it's what led really to how I came to GS1 US. I've been here 10 years now, and I wasn't looking for a job. And I just very, very fortuitous that I fell into this job. And even at the time when they were recruiting me, and they said, well, we'd love to talk to you about this particular role, which was a different role at the time. And I said, yeah, no, thank you. And then they said, well, you wouldn't have to move to New Jersey. And I said, oh, well, I guess we should talk. And then as I went home that night and reflected on it, I was thinking, I really am not happy in the job, right? I'm stagnating in the job I'm in. I'm probably not going to go anywhere significant that I could see at the time. So I came here, and then 4 years into here, we decided to launch an innovation function at the request of our board and the senior leadership team. And once again, I'd been running apparel and general merchandise community engagement for 4 years. I loved it. I loved the executive community I was working with, and definitely was more of a voluntold, like, we'd like you to come and do this innovation thing. And boy, what an amazing, so it's been 6.5 years now that I've been on this team. Started it from scratch. And I think that the whole thing has been very catalyzing. We had nothing, and now we have this team, and we're 18 people, and we've added some things to our remit over the years. And so the thing I say to my team is, you constantly need to pressure test yourselves. And right, are we doing the right things for the right reasons? Are we structured the right way? And I think they get a little bit weary because I love change so much, and we'll just finish a cycle of change, and I'm like, okay, now I need to start the next one. They're like, can we just let this one sink in for a minute? So
the challenges of being a catalyst leader and working for catalyst leaders, totally. So taking from that, then, what are like one or two of the essential skills that you've learned over the years that have made you successful as a catalyst or in this role, and maybe sharing some stories of how they've helped? Like, are there times when you failed because you didn't have these skills?
Well, diplomacy, I would say, is the biggest one. And I know that seems kind of odd, but it's completely true. When we started the team, my boss kind of felt we needed to bring in someone from the outside, because innovation is about venture, it's about investing, even though for us as a nonprofit, it's a little different. And so we brought in this serial entrepreneur to run the team, and I was the VP that was reporting to this person. And it was quite clear to me almost from the beginning that this wasn't going to work. And I had come from the business, right? 4 years in the business, moved into this role, probably had no respect for how valuable the relationships I had built in the business were. Of course, we've worked with you on that, the whole thing around empathy and active listening, skills that you were building that sometimes you don't even know you're building. And then watching this executive that I was working for, like a bull in a china shop, just not making enemies, not understanding the business, feeling like maybe it was a little bit of empire building, although we were just 3.5 people. So there was no empire. We were like a Robin Hood's merry men and women. But so after about 10 months, when it was clear to our CEO that it wasn't working and he made the change and he put me in leadership over the team, he acknowledged that it was because I understood the business, because I want to be partner with the business. And so I think that diplomacy has just helped well. And I always tell my team, it's not that we don't want to take credit for our work. I completely understand that. That's a need you have innately, right? To feel satisfied about what you've contributed. But the greatest compliment is when someone takes your idea and runs with it and thinks of it as their own. I'll give you the credit. We can have the pat on the back and the circle time as a team. But what we want is for the business to pick up innovative ideas and make them part of our everyday operations. And I think in order to do that, you really have to be willing to manage relationships, be a good peer, be a good colleague and friend, and then kind of deal with some of your emotional stuff more like inside the tent. So that's how I always think of it, is there's how can we vent, how can we express our frustration, but then how can we be that diplomatic voice that owns our communication, that owns clear expectations with other teams. I just had one of my direct reports say last week, one of his teammates was upset and he said, yeah, but you didn't put a deadline on it. Like, it's your responsibility. It's how I feel like when my dog does something wrong. I'm all, it's my fault. I didn't set the boundary correctly. But I actually learned this very early on in my career because I was known to have a bit of a temper tantrum, and I probably was not very patient nor mature. I mean, there's just no exchange for age and tenure in some cases, but I used to throw tantrums. I would, like, if I didn't get my way, I would make a big scene. I was such a drama queen. It's very, I look back on it and think it was awful. But I had the CEO of the company I was working for. So I was an executive assistant, and I didn't even work for the CEO. I worked for a sub-executive. She pulled me in her office and said, I just see so much potential in you, but you're going to have to get control of your professional attitude. You have to be kind to other people. You have to show partnership. So I learned that from her. It was not something I just knew going into it, but in watching her, who had become a CEO at 34. And at the time I was 21, and I was like, ooh, I want to be you. How do I be you? Right. When I'm 34, which, I'm well over 34 now, and I'm still the CEO. So that's a different thing. But, but just, I really admired her for taking the time, because I was so far down the food chain from her. And she probably set the stage as a strong female leader that I've been so fortunate in my career to work for so many of. The appreciation I have for what she did for me, right, all those years ago, now that at the time, I felt pretty chastised, but that was probably the pivotal event in causing me to eventually get the maturity, understand that, burning bridges is not really a healthy way to live in the workplace. And I tell my team that all the time. Look, taking the high road never hurt. It's not always fun, and it slows things down, but it's going to be far more beneficial to you than stooping to somebody's level, having a fit, and then ending up with relationships that you can't manage professionally. So that's my number one. My other one, which wouldn't surprise either of you, is what I call relentless optimism. It's that sort of yes and, which it's so funny to me, because the people who I struggle with the most in my career are the people who say no first. And it's not that they intentionally mean no forever, but you know how it is. Like, there's that person you say, like, oh, this will never work. Like, yeah, no, but that's not how we've always done it. I know we all know those cliche arguments, but I really try to be the opposite of that person. If somebody says something to me, and of course we've picked up on, all the great innovation leaders over time. We've worked with Duncan Wardle, who was at Disney for a while. He is Dan Seawald from Deliberate Innovators, your team, like all these teams we've worked with over the years. And the yes and was a real unlock for me in being able to say, I love your idea. How can I build on it? Or believing that every idea in its infancy is a potentially good idea. So that whole notion of nurturing versus judgment, how do we nurture something to the point we can actually make a valid decision around whether to judge it or not? And I think I don't do well with people who sort of rush to judgment up front. Now, what I've learned as an adaptive skill is, right, to give them the space to think that way. So I actually don't pitch ideas to say no people as, hey, what do you think of this? I sort of seed in ideas like, we were having this thought that we might do something, and how do you feel about that? Have you had any experience with it? You kind of play it off that way. And then maybe 3 or 6 months later, this is that whole high road takes longer thing I mentioned. You actually see it come about and you see people get on board with you. But it's, I remember one woman saying, how do I make it the best idea you never had, but you, right, you think it's yours?
Yes.
There's just a lot of value to that, but it's because I'm optimistic about something that I want to see it through. So I'm typically that person who believes every idea is a good idea until proven otherwise. And, it's probably burned to me a few times, but by and large, it's actually built so much, just so much credibility with other people who are trying to nurture an idea and are looking for a safe space to do that. And that's my other thing about Relentless Optimism, is you create safe spaces for people to kind of, work through their own half-thought opportunities.
There's so much to unpack, and I love how you ended it. I mean, they're so connected, the Relentless Optimism back to the diplomacy. It's one of the tools about bringing people on the journey with you, right? I love this story about that person early in your career. I remember having a similar moment, and it's like, it stings so bad, but then you pause and you listen for a moment. You're like, shit, I think they're right.
Yes.
But it's not an easy, so that part isn't easy. So I would love to understand, what helped you be open to that feedback in the first place? Because a lot of people would just be like, well, screw you, and I don't even work with it, and then what was the journey? Diplomacy is not an easy skill to learn. So what were some of the key steps on the way to learning, developing that skill?
Well, definitely failure, like anything else, making some bad choices, and being able to have someone help you look at it from the outside without making you feel like you're, right, just the worst person in the world. And that was it for me, because she had witnessed me do something that was, oh my gosh, if I saw an employee do this, I don't know that I would have been as kind as Tanya was to me. But this was back in the day when you built software and you had to create user manuals, and we had a production guy and he had to create these user manuals, and they were in 3-ring binders, and I then had to ship them out to customers. Like, oh my gosh, can you even imagine if you couldn't go on the internet and find the PDF, what would you do? So, and so he created all of these notebooks, but the pages weren't in the binder correctly. So it was just, I don't know what happened, but didn't close. And I was taking these binders and opening them like this and watching all the pages fall on the ground, basically telling him what a terrible work he had done. And she walked by and watched me do this. And so at 21 years old, I guess I thought, I'm shit, you suck. Let me show you how terrible you are. Just the way that she pulled me aside and did it very direct. She didn't mince words, but she didn't make me feel small. And she essentially said, I'm pointing this out to you because I want to help you become better, versus, right. I mean, I've heard the stories of people who had the boss. I mean, I had a boss yell at me one time. He would, ironically, my son called him Steve Irwin. He was Welsh, but he sounded a lot like Steve Irwin. And he yelled at me. He made me cry. I didn't cry in front of him, but I went back to my cube and just burst into tears, thinking, how could you treat someone like this, right? And thinking back, oh wow, that was me, right? So just I think being able to, self-awareness is the basis for everything for me. And I think it was just the fact that she had approached me in an effort to help me on my journey to better self-awareness, versus to kind of throw down the, hey, I'm the CEO, you suck. I mean, she never jeopardized my job, which she surely could have. It was such poor behavior. And I've really tried to take that approach with people. Nothing to be gained by being condescending, nothing to be gained by, proving that it's not so much about being right, because there's sometimes when you probably need to be right, but about proving your level, right? Do you know who I am? I can't stand when people say, do you know who I am? What does that have to do with anything? So, but for her as the CEO to literally take me as the lowest person on the totem pole, bridge that gap, and then give me helpful advice and also confidence. Whatever she did that day instilled in me the confidence to believe I could change. And I think that's what's also important, is giving people confidence that, right, this isn't the end of the world. You can actually change and do better. And very thankful. I should probably get back in touch with her. I did reach out to her years later, and she had actually retired quite young and was trekking across Bhutan or something, and doing fun things like that. So.
I want to know that woman. Let's talk to that woman. Thank you for this story. I mean, I think what I hear too is that she was modeling the behavior that she was hoping that you could get to, right? Is like, don't pick up the binders, pull someone aside with gentleness and compassion and directness, and give them the feedback. I could ask a million more stories, but I know that we have to get to our rapid fire round. So thank you for sharing diplomacy and relentless optimism. I love it. Tracy, over to you. Oh, sorry. What are your biggest challenges right now as a Catalyst leader?
Number one, pace of change. Things just don't move fast enough. So I know, and I highlighted that in what I said before. So I acknowledge that you have to do things right, and sometimes that takes longer, but my appetite for change is so much higher than our ability to execute. And it just continues to be a thing that, the tension that lives inside of me. I want to move faster. It's the whole thing about the book, right? Move fast, break shit, burn. Like, yes, let's go fast. We got to go fast. But that's just not the pace that different personalities and different skill sets can maintain. And so trying to be adaptive to that. But I'll tell you, I just last week, I had a major breakthrough on something I've really been passionate about for 8 years. And had a great breakthrough discussion with my peers and with our CEO, and feel like we're going to go. So patience is probably right. The counter to that. How do you fight against that challenge of pace?
Yeah. Combined with your diplomacy and your positive optimism, right? Like not giving up, but knowing how to bring people along. And I know you think deeply about that. So it's not like that, that just happens. So
right.
I think a lot of our listeners will relate to the pace of change is not fast enough in this world. All right.
Yes.
Thanks, Melanie. Over to you for the rapid fire, Tracy.
Melanie, what is one thing you do to be ready for a big meeting?
No, when you asked me this question, I was so embarrassed because I print things. Okay. I'm like, I try to be very conscious. I use OneNote and all these tools, but when it's important, I print, and then I have to make notes. And like for a board meeting, if we prepare the pre-read, I print the pre-read, and I'm sort of jotting, like, you really want to highlight this. This is really important here. So printing and writing, I'm very tactile. That was something I kind of figured out within the last 9 months in all my efforts to electronify my life, that sometimes I just need to write stuff down. And so before big meetings, it's always about like the myriad Post-it notes and scratch papers, and then the satisfaction of tearing them all up when you're done.
What is it that you're writing and printing in preparation?
In the case of today, it was your questions so that I could be thoughtful about my answers. In the case of, a big event we're planning, it's sort of a set of emails. As you can see, there's a lot going on with this, but so it's just the things that help me remember and connect dots. But particularly because my whole life, I was spontaneous until I got to high school. I didn't even really need to do homework. I didn't need to study for tests. And then high school and college corrected that behavior in me. Right. But that whole thing of just being prepared, because I think I told you all, it was another Catalyst, Vaughn, that I was paired in a breakout session with. And she said, you need to predict the first 3 quantifiable questions that are going to be asked to you about a project. I was like, that is amazing. So that's some coaching. I immediately took that. And now that's some coaching I give my team when they're preparing for something. I said, anticipate what questions are going to be asked. And we just put it into practice 2 weeks ago in a steering committee meeting on one of our projects. And I feel like the person was better equipped to deal with the questions that came based on kind of that anticipatory approach. So I think of it as sort of just planning and showing up as your best self for something, which I have not always done.
I so appreciate you saying that. You giggled that you're embarrassed, but I find it so wonderful to hear that even at your level of executive, that's still something that really is important. And, I feel like there's a fallacy maybe that I have, or I'm guessing others have, that when you hit a level, you just kind of, that you're so smart that you keep it all in your head. But I love how you disabuse it of like, yeah, no, that was my unprepared self, my younger self. The truth is my executive self does the work. And that's what lets me be here. So thank you. That's incredibly helpful, certainly for me and for Shannon. All right, what's your favorite way to spend a free day?
Well, probably on my little tiny farm. So we have a little 2.5 acres, and it's actually not a farm. I tell people, you all have farms. I have a petting zoo, but we have goats and chickens and 2 dogs, and I just love the animals. And so if there's not something going on for a day, I do this random wandering. I'll go walk out in the pasture and pick up, little bottle caps or whatever trash. I feel like I'm always cleaning it. So how do I keep finding more trash? But as Shannon knows, we live in the windiest, well, probably not the windiest state, but it feels like it. And so there's always things blowing, but I just love to walk around the property, give the animals treats, and, I'll pick up a random chicken who really doesn't want me to pick her up and just cuddle her a little bit. So that's like a free time thing for sure, is stuff around the farm.
Melanie, chicken stories. I'm just saying, if you ever have drinks with Melanie, chicken stories.
Come on in with the chicken questions. What does it do for you to spend a day out with the animal?
Well, it's cathartic in its own way, only because there's not a lot of dialogue. So, there's a lot of baby talk, which is probably completely useless. But just this morning, so it's snowing here this morning, and I always go and give the goats a little treat, a little grain. They don't typically get it, but maybe once a day if I'm home, I'll go give them some. And they were all hiding in their barn. They don't like to come out of the barn when it's cold. And I managed to coax one goat, my little favorite baby goat, to I had to cut in the covered shelter for her to have this grain. I'm shaking the bowl like, you love this, don't you? She came and she's in there eating it. And I said, well, look, you're going to get all this because they won't come out of the barn. I took a little handful and I went out to the barn, and my favorite boy goat, he sniffed it and he was like, oh, that's the good stuff. And once I got him to follow me, all the other goats followed him. And so I'm like this little Pied Piper, leading my goats to a treat. I don't know. It's just, it goes back to my point about satisfaction. Like, you want to feel that you've accomplished something. And if the best thing I accomplished is I made my goats happy because they got a treat and I convinced them to come out of their barn, it's some sort of big win for the day. But
I just imagine how good all of that feels in the body, and how I just felt transported there. So thank you.
Yes.
All right. Who is your favorite catalyst, your favorite famous catalyst, dead or alive?
Well, she's probably not famous, but you could Google her. So she's Google famous, as most of us are. My aunt, Donna Noose, she was the first female chief of staff of the Colorado National Guard. So she achieved the rank of colonel. And then she became the first female chief of staff for the Army National Guard in Colorado, which again, as you reflect back on your life and you don't necessarily think of these things, but my aunt was someone who worked outside the home at a time when that wasn't as common, but she was quite accomplished in her career. And to have retired from the Colorado Army National Guard after having achieved that first female chief of staff role. And I just know because my dad admired that so much about her. She is, he's passed on now, but was his older sister. And he would always speak of, her career accomplishments with pride, but to be a woman in that environment, which we all know, the history of the United States military has been very challenging for lots of minority groups, but just that gender identification that I share with my aunt of being a woman in a field that has been dominated by men, even to this day, just interesting things, and I try not to get jaded, but looking at things that are happening in the business space where you see the retirement and then you see who is the successor, and it still kind of follows that pattern. And I always think it should be the best qualified person for the job, but knowing that best qualified person in a situation where there just weren't that many women to begin with was my aunt. And she's since retired and she does scrapbooking and other things now, but it just how much change she had to endure, on herself, the burden of being the catalyst, but also that she persevered and that she really never made a big deal out of these accomplishments. You would have to prod that out of her because she doesn't go around self-promoting about those things, but that was a pretty admirable achievement that she had to do that. And so I just admire her a lot for that, and think in terms of quiet heroes, she would definitely be one of those in my life.
What a cool model to have. And I love that term, quiet hero.
Yeah.
Right? Who are those folks that we're looking up to that may not even realize that they're the ones that we're modeling after? Thank you.
Yeah.
As we wrap up today, Melanie, do you have a call to action for our listeners?
Probably lots of calls to action around work, but that's too expected. So I would just say my number one call to action is be kind. Just be kind. You never know what kindness you bestow on someone else can actually be a catalyzing event for them. And that's really, and not worrying about whether in the moment you are successful or not, because kindness is always successful. I just think of times when somebody's just done something nice for me unexpectedly, and how good that made me feel. And even if they moved on past it, and I've really tried this year to be much better about sending thank you notes, as you know, just saying, I really thank you so much for whatever the kindness was that you showed. None of us get handwritten notes anymore. So I know that it makes me happy to be able to do them. I have 2 sitting on my desk that should have gone out yesterday, but I'll get them done today. If you ask me what my kryptonite is, it's procrastination. But I just think, right, it's such a simple call to action. It's very easy to be kind. And I've seen the difference that it makes in leaders who, I have this friend, Byron, and he was a program manager at a company I worked at years ago. And he said, there's 2 ways. You can manage people like this, or you can manage people like this. And I just think of that all the time. Be this person, right? Be the one that's lifting people up and treating the success of the team as more important success, because the satisfaction is actually much greater when you've done something together, than being able to kind of stand on your soapbox and say, look what I did. And so that's truly, I think, my simplest call to action is just show love to people and be kind, because the difference it can make is you may never know, but they'll know, and then they'll pay it forward to somebody else.
And I love how that takes us full circle to diplomacy. Right. And that key skill that you want us all to have, it's like a muscle that we have to build to achieve that. Melanie, we love the spark you bring to the Catalyst Leadership Trust. We love getting to come and support your teams. So thank you for this gift today, getting to be with us on the podcast and reaching out to the whole audience. Really, thank you.
Thank you both. It was such a pleasure to spend time with you again.
Again, that's right. And thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at www.catalystconstellations.com.
And be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out. If you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way.
Thanks again.